Hi everyone, and welcome to Pro Tools Answers, where we discuss, demonstrate and elaborate on your Pro Tools questions put into the official Avid Pro Tools support forum in Facebook land. My name is Dave Phillips, audio engineer and Avid certified instructor and lecturer for Point Blank Music Schools in the UK. And joining me is Anders, also an ACI instructor at Tonecraft Work in Austria and lecturer for Siegen University in Germany.
Hello.
And all the way over in Tokyo, we have Avid's audio curriculum manager, master instructor, Mr. Andy Hageman.
Hello and good evening.
Good morning to you, sir. Now, what we do is we wade in on the forum posts as well to throw our 2 cents in, but there's generally so much noise in the group and nuance in the circumstances that the right answers aren't always highlighted, and often there isn't enough information to clearly present the answer anyway. A part of our job as lecturers and trainers is to take complicated issues and then boil them down into clear explanations and demonstrations in context, and that's what we aim to do with Pro Tools Answers. Now, before I continue, could I ask you guys, if you're liking what you're doing, could you please subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon as well so that you know when our episodes are released every week. We do that every Sunday morning, so make sure you're there with us on Sunday morning with a nice coffee and in a comfy chair ready to listen to us talk tech for just under an hour or so. And if you like the video, please hit like. If you don't like the video for any reason, you're welcome to hit dislike, but bear in mind that you will see grown men cry.
Grown being a relative term.
Large men cry. This week's episode was inspired by not one but 2 related questions. The first, we have Jason, who asks, so now that I have all of my tracks assigned to specific buses, what volumes should I keep them at versus the actual track volumes? Is there a trick for this? Or is it done just by ear balancing, balancing them against each other? And also from Sharbel, who asks, can turning the master fader down have more headroom? Can turning the master fader to have more headroom change my bit depth? So there's quite a lot to unpack here, and we spent quite a lot of time discussing this between ourselves. What is this subject about? And we discussed and we discussed and we argued and we argued and we argued and we compromised and we compromised, and eventually I got what I want. And
we decided to skip it.
So we're going to start off. Well, I want to start off by basically just breaking down the basic principles of levels going into the various parts of a mix journey, and then Andy wants to talk about some really interesting stuff to do with Pro Tools and its capabilities and what it'll do and how that relates to signal flow. And how that relates to our various levels and things. Okay, so let's just start off by just describing a very basic session that I have here, which is actually just drum. It's just a drum track. Now, what we're ultimately aiming for with the question, what levels do I set my buses at? And we're talking subgroups. What levels do I set my subgroups at? Is all going to come to a head at the end of the session right here. Oh, actually, I need to share my screen with you guys, don't I? Okay, now this will all come to a head right at the end of the signal chain in the master faders. Now, what we tend to aim for, and again, Anders and Andy may, hopefully they're going to agree with me with this.
Stay friends.
Indeed, because friends can disagree on the internet, can't we? And yeah, so what we're aiming for at the is to achieve around about -6 dB peak, dB full scale of peak at the end of our session. And that is what we tend to think of as a pre-master. So when we're bouncing our tracks down, full songs down, to be sent off to a mastering engineer, that then gives the mastering engineer, on the face of it, 6 dB full scale of headroom to work with. I can see Andy going. Hopefully you're not disagreeing.
No, not yet.
Not yet. So if I just hit play on this, what we're going to see is we're going to see the levels of my individual tracks. And this is a drum track, multi-mic'd drum kit. That's arriving at a drum group. So this is relating to Jason's question. Levels arriving at a drum group, and then assuming we have drums, bass, guitar, etc., all those are going to be joined together, and what they will do is they'll arrive at the main outputs prior to hitting the speakers, prior to hitting tape. We want to be aiming for those to peak at around about -6 dB. And the question, what I think the question is how do we get there? And actually that should be the crux of the question for me, is how do we achieve a full mix arriving at our outputs at -6 dB? And one of the answers, I'm sure, will be about managing your gain through the different stages of the mixer. Now, when we have our clips stored on a hard drive that relate to our audio files at a hard drive, if you are receiving this as a mixing engineer, you weren't involved in any of the tracking, you're going to be receiving these files that have been recorded at a specific level. And you have to be able to deal with that in the door when you receive those before you go on and do any more mixing. If you were the tracking engineer, the likelihood is that you're going to be deciding what your peak level is. Now, in the olden days, we would tend to aim for as close to 0 dB as possible, wouldn't we, when we were working with analog stuff and we were working with tape, so that we could get the absolute best signal to noise ratio that we could, to ensure that we get a nice clean recording, there's no noise, and our music is going to be nice and loud and pure. And that starts with setting at what level the microphones are going to come into the system at. And I think, am I right in saying that we tend to aim for about -18 dB in our digital realm?
Very often, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll start with that as a baseline.
But let me just add something here. That -18 is, of course, what you would aim for if you're recording in 24-bit,
yes,
right? If you're recording 16-bit, where you only have 96 dBs of theoretical headroom, you have to record a bit hotter to still have the dynamic range that you're aiming for. So this is for 24-bit audio, right?
It is, yes.
And the reason why we're doing this is a little bit different in the digital world than it was in the analog world. In the analog world, what you were trying to do, because everything that you were doing in a mixing board and in effects has some degree of amplification going on. And anytime you ride, if the amp is too low, or the faders are too low, or whatever, your preamp is too low, then, as Anders says, you start to run the risk of noise floor, which is a serious issue in the analog world, because their dynamic range is a bit lower than even 16-bit. But also, if you start to push things, then that amplifier, the real world amplifier, starts to express what we call nonlinearity, which is either harmonic or non-harmonic distortion, which is going to change the color of the sound, which is, when it's intentional, we like it. When it's not intentional, we want to avoid it. That doesn't exist in a digital world. So your D to A, to A to D converter, when you're recording into it, doesn't have that sweet spot. Okay, there's no amplification going on, and so what we do now, if like what you said, 18-bit, -18 dB, is just 3 bits of data. And so you still have a full dynamic range that you've got in there. And the reason why we do it now is just so that we give ourselves enough headroom so that we don't clip if somebody shouts. But we don't do it for the same reason that we used to do it in the analog studios.
No.
Agreed.
Yeah. So we're aiming for -18 dB, and as we've said, that allows us then, if we just stick to -18 and dB and 0 dB is our absolute ceiling, that essentially gives us 18 dB's worth of headroom there to be able to work with our audio, right? I mean, it's very, very, very simplified version of the explanation. And there's a couple of ways that we can make sure that we get that -18 dB signal into our system. If we just have a look at this kick drum right here, we can see that this is peaking. Let me just reset that peak. peaking at around about just under minus 8 dB. So I want to give myself an extra 10 dBs worth of signal there. And what I would be aiming to do here is kind of match that across all of my tracks. So all of my tracks are peaking at around about the same level. And then that gives me, as far as I'm concerned, a very good starting point to be able to then process each of my signals across the entire signal journey and not make anything too quiet, and even worse, not make anything too loud. So we can do that with the modern way to do that is using our clip-based gain. We can turn the internal gain of our file up on the timeline here. Sorry, what am I doing? I want to turn it down. Turn it up. I'm going to turn that down a bit further. And we can see that we've suddenly got a lot less gain going into my channel. So that's one way we can do it. If you like your traditional gain controls, you can stick a trim across all of your tracks, and you can use a traditional trim control to do exactly the same thing. It achieves the same goal, it just uses up an insert. So, but I think this is partly to do with how you might prefer to, what your preferred workflow might be. If you like that workflow of using old school trim controls, that's one way to do it. If you're quite happy to use the more modern approach of using the clip-based gain, then we can do that across each of our tracks as well. And what that will do is then it will just manage the gain going into each of your plugins at each of the various stages. And let's say we put this EQ on insert A, and we have an input level for our EQ, and we have an output level for our EQ. So this allows us to manage the gain going into the plugin, but also after we've made the changes within the plugin itself, either we're boosting or we're cutting, we can either increase the gain coming out of the plugin or decrease the gain coming out of the plugin using the bypass control and our ears to kind of manually judge whether the level coming out is the same as the level going in. And we can do the same. We will do the same thing with our compressors. We have an input and an output. Some compressors don't give us that option. So if you're wanting to do that, or if you're needing to do that, you might need to use an output control of a previous plugin to be able to achieve the same thing.
Or you can use another trim plugin.
Or you could use another trim plugin, indeed. But the ultimate goal there is to ensuring that the amount of signal going into your auxiliary, your subgroup, is at a particular level as well. And if we can see, if we drop this down here, that's managing the output of my entire drum group going into my mix bus. And part of the question was, how do I use these volume controls? How do I judge what these volume controls should be to get the signal into various areas of my mixer? And certainly the starting point, I think, would be to make sure that your instrument in its entirety, no matter how many mics you're using, it could be two for a guitar, it could be a single for a vocal, it could be 3 for a brass section. However you choose to group all of your tracks into a subgroup, is that they should be arriving, and I tend to get my tracks arriving into my subgroups at around about -10. And that gives me quite a lot of room to be able to work. And I also find that it's not, once I combine all of my different instruments together, then they're not going to be arriving at an egregious level at my mix bus. Now I can either control that output of each of my channels into the subgroup by grouping all of my tracks together and just dragging them all down so that they all maintain their various levels. You can see if I push my drums here, we're pushing more signal into that drum auxiliary there. If I reduce the level, we're sending less signal into my drum auxiliary. Another clever trick is to use a master fader. And we're just going to stick that master fader in front of my drum group. I'm going to have it monitoring my drums bus, and I'm going to use that to reduce the gain going into my drum group right there. And once I've set that so it's peaking around about -10, I can leave that then, and I can essentially get rid of all of my drum tracks, and I can just work with my drum master. In fact, if I get rid of my drum trim, I can essentially work with that now as my main drum volume control, and that is then controlling how much signal is going to be arriving at my mix 2 bus. Now, if you rinse, lather and repeat for every one of your instruments, you're going to be making sure that all of those signals combined balanced together so that they make a nice sounding mix balance. They don't arrive too loud or too quiet at your mix bus, and you'll achieve around about -6 worth of peak actually at its destination. Over to you guys.
So I'll jump on next. I think one of the things that you'll find on the interwebs is that this topic, which falls under kind of a general heading of gain staging, you can go to a website and find highly respected people say exactly the opposite things, and they're both correct as long as you put the proper conditions on what they're doing. Now, the one thing that I'm always concerned with is that people mix as if they're on an analog desk in a digital room, and they don't. One of two things happens: either they don't get the result that they expect because the digital mixer is different, or they do things unnecessarily slowly. Okay, because they think they have to work around things. Now, when we talk about gain staging comes from the analog days. Again, like I said, when everything had an amplifier, so your EQs, your compressors, all your outboard effects were designed to take a specific input level, and that was what the circuitry was designed to be optimized for. Yeah. So, for example, let's say something would have a -20 dB ideal signal, and it would say that in the manual, right? So that this is the recommended level of the signal to come in, and then you could play with it. You know what you're working with. So if you wanted it to be as neutral as possible, you'd give it that -20 dB. Yeah. If you wanted to get some distortion, you would push it a little bit, right? And so what we would do in those days is we would make sure that everything going to that that process or that circuit would ultimately get to that target voltage. We were by each stage we were setting the appropriate gain, and that's where we get gain staging from. That doesn't exist in the same way inside of a DAW. Okay, now what Dave has done is a fantastic way to work, especially if you're using plugins that emulate analog gear, because analog gear is very often designed to emulate that target voltage. And at that point, so if you take like UA Waves, in their manuals, they will say that this plugin is designed to behave like this device, and this is the level that it's optimized for. So it behaves, for better or worse, exactly like its analog predecessor. Now, if you weren't using any of that, then you could have your levels be as hot as possible. It doesn't. There's no. For example, if you were just using let's say the EQ7. The EQ7 is a native plugin. It has no target voltage. It operates the same regardless of what level you feed it. So if I was just using those plugins, I could use any, as long as I'm not clipping, I'm fine, right? So I could have it -0.1, and it's going to sound exactly the same as -18. So both people are right. So the people who say there's a target voltage, they're right in their workflow because they're doing this certain thing. People who say you don't need to worry about it and that DAWs don't have the same problems as analog boards are also right. The problem is there's nobody explaining that distinction, and so people have fights online, which we're not having. Okay, and so this is the thing, and what I liked about what Dave said. Dave said two things that are undeniably true. One is use clip gain to set the level. Why, David? Did you use clip gain to set the level and not your faders to set the level hitting your plugins?
Well, it's the difference between setting the level going into the channel and the level going out of the channel, because the gain on the clip itself, this is how at the level that this track was recorded at is the level going into the mixer. So it's going to hit insert A and our EQ at a specific level, and then once what we're doing with the output fader is we're controlling the output after it's gone through that signal journey.
Exactly right. So clip gain. So here's the signal flow. The first thing is clip effects. So clip effects, if you have Pro Tools Ultimate, is the first thing that happens to a clip. The second thing that happens to a clip is clip gain, and the third thing that happens is the first insert, which is why Dave quite rightly says if you want to set a target level, then clip gain or the trim plugin, either one, is the right way to go, because both of those things are adjacent to each other in the signal flow. The other thing he said is use your ears, which you have to do, because you will find I do this all the time when I'll mix and then I'll throw in a plugin that I don't use all that often, and one or two things. First of all, it's an analog model plugin, or it's a plugin that doesn't have floating point internal processing, and all of a sudden I'm hearing distortion that I normally don't hear, and I'm like, great, okay, that's right, I need to bring this down because I need to go to a more analog style of gain staging. Now the way that Dave's done it is he's just does it as a general workflow, which I think is fine too. You're not sacrificing anything particularly meaningful. That's my soapbox, and I'm off it for now.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Andy. Here, you're both right. But one thing is also that in a strictly digital realm, like Pro Tools is, the answer could also be it doesn't really matter, because you have all of the space in the world. It's like you could have your signal being really, really loud, and as long as you don't hear distortion, you're still fine. And you have the master fader that is basically like a 24-bit window that you can pull up or down on a very large decibel scale, so that you can still find the right spot for this 24-bit window, which of course we have to output our signal into the 24-bit realm, which all of our converters are working at 24-bit. So you can still, in a strictly digital sense, still be all right with mixing way too loud.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
if you're in, as I understand, if you're in the digital realm, what Pro Tools can do ultimately does mean it doesn't matter, because you have the system can deal with so much level that it doesn't necessarily matter what level you have things coming in and going out at. But I think it can be, depending on who is listening to this and how they're receiving it, I think some of the information probably has to be caveated in quite a lot of ways, so that you don't confuse, especially students. I mean, we're all lecturers, right?
Yeah.
And the amount of times that I've marked projects that I've seen that the level is just busting out of the top of the meter bridge, essentially busting out of the top of the master fader, like some kind of massive firework going off. And you don't need the level going, it doesn't need to be that hot. They're making it loud because they want loud mixes. But that's where saying it doesn't necessarily matter can be a little bit dangerous.
Of course, yeah. And especially if you're using analog gear as well, right?
Well, exactly.
It doesn't matter until it does.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
And
So it doesn't.
You have the perfect presentation for this, I think, right?
I do, as it happens. Yeah. So and just before I showed this, it doesn't matter until it does. And if you're using all native plugins, it might not matter. You might be able to just go ahead and throw those in there because they're they're floating 32-bit floating point natives, and they're fine. But then you put one other plug in, and all of a sudden it does matter because it's either one that doesn't float or it's one that, again, I hate to go back again, is emulating an analog piece of gear. So I do have a session here that let me show this off.
Yeah, and of course, Dave, I mean, you should always have a best practice for mixing. And if you're doing the Dave style, managing your signal flow
that's what we'll call
and everything, you are basically always in the safe, right?
Yes.
And that's what I like about what Dave has. Is Dave's workflow is safe and it does no harm.
Yep.
Right. So somebody might say, yeah, but you're sacrificing, 18 dB or whatever your target is. You could, by the way, it doesn't have to be an 18 dB target, but just having that bit of safety. Yeah. Are you sacrificing dynamic range? Yes, but you're not sacrificing it in any meaningful way, because if you're working in 24-bit, your dynamic range of your session is 24 dB louder than you can tolerate as a human being. So having 8 dB of headroom is absolutely not a problem, right? It would be in an analog studio because their dynamic range for tape is much lower, but not here. We don't worry about that.
No. As far as I'm concerned, it's a good baseline to start from, and then once you understand how things work and how the DAW works, you can then taper your workflow and your philosophy to however you want, as long as you're not breaking anything.
Exactly right.
Yep.
And tell us about your session. It looks marvelous.
Yes. So I call this the session from hell, and this is a whole bunch of tracks. Each one of these tracks has a signal generator on it. Okay, signal generator, the teacher's best friend, and the level of the signal generator is -0 dB. So it's as hot as possible. Let's say on this track here, it's as hot as possible without clipping. So if I unmute this, you heard a brief sine wave, right? Now, here's where life changes a little bit. I'm going to take a look at this track. Now, see, these tracks here have a yellow clip light. And this is clipping that is alarming, but not the end of the world. This is simply saying that the signal on this track goes above the ability for this meter to show. And this is one of the beautiful things about DAWs having floating point math, which can handle a great deal of voltage, of volume. So what I have here is I've got, let's say on this track here, on duplicate number 7, I've got a signal generator, same thing. And then I use trim in the opposite direction than what Dave did. I boosted it by 6. Now, in an analog board, first of all, you would never do this in a million years, but it wouldn't sound like a sine wave, but here it does. Completely fine. No difference except for it's louder.
Yeah.
No distortion. Now, let's go one step further. And I've got on this first track, I've got my sine wave, right? I've trimmed it up by 6 dB, and it's hitting an EQ. But this EQ is a native plugin. This is a native floating point. It swims in the water of 32-bit floating point completely fine. And so if I go ahead here, what?
No distortion.
That's impossible, you might say, but it's not. But if this was, for example, if this EQ plugin was, for example, an emulation of a hardware, or if it was one that didn't float, it might cause problems. But this one doesn't, because it's completely fine. And not only do I've sitting both. It's clipping on both inputs and outputs, but it's still not giving me a problem, because in the mix engine of a point system, it's extraordinarily hard to clip, to get an unrecoverable clip. Now, here's the other thing that I think that sometimes people do wrong. And so what I'll do, and I'll try to do this as quickly as I possibly can, is I'm going to unmute all of these. There. Now, you can see here that there's a tiny little bit, if you listen really
tiny little bit of distortion.
That's giving me some Spectrum 128 feels right there.
Yeah,
there you
exactly.
go. So that is giving me a lot of distortion. Now, why is this yellow not a problem, but this red is a problem. The yellow's not a problem because it's a 32-point path dumping into a 64-bit floating point mix engine. Everything's fine. The meters don't show, and it looks terrible. I'll be honest with you. I don't let my sessions go out like this just because it looks so bad. This actually is bad.
Because it's you're actually clipping that 24-bit window of the master, right?
Exactly right. So
in the mixer, Andy, did you say 64-bit floating point?
Yeah. That's correct.
Yeah. So 32-bit floating point has a theoretical headroom, something like 1,500 decibels, isn't it?
Something like that.
Something like that. So, and that it's essentially unlimited. Right?
It's not. Nothing's unlimited. By the way, Dave, I would make one clarification because I think it's important for us to speak very clearly. You said it right, but I'm going to say it again. Floating point math has a greater headroom. It does not have a greater dynamic range. Okay? So the headroom of 32-bit floating point is like you're like it's right. It's like 1,500 dB of headroom.
Insanely high.
And 64-bit is extra insane, right? Yeah. But the dynamic range is still 144 dB. It just, when you're dealing with floating point math, you have an exponent that shifts that range, okay? So that's part of the reason why I don't record at 32-bit floating point. You don't have to, because the mixer is doing your floating for you. Well, and your incoming signal can be whatever you want it to be.
I tell you what, I really advocate recording 32-bit floating point when you're working with live people, so that you can roll back those clips.
If you have an interface that records at 32-bit floating point, you're right. But if it's recording at 24-bit and just adding in an exponent, it's not going to help you. So you have to be careful to make sure that what you're actually doing is going to give you that kind of result. Now here's the other thing that I just wanted to show here. Very often, I see a lot of people, especially people who learn mixing from older folks like me, because they'll tend to mix on a digital system the same way that they were taught to mix by a guy who learned on an analog system. And one of the things you would never do on a analog board is you don't touch that master fader. I've been in studios, maybe you guys have too. Have you ever been into a studio where the master fader will have a piece of tape on it?
Yeah.
Don't move it, because if you move it down, you're gonna start to deal with noise floor, and if you move it up, you're getting all these distortion on in the areas because there's an amplifier. That doesn't occur here, right? And what this master fader is, and what Dave showed with the master fader on the drum group, which does the same thing, basically just allowing you to shift that range of floating point math. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to bring this up to minus 40.
You've got such great pillow talk, Andy.
I do. So it's futon talk over here in Japan. So right now I've got my master fader on minus 41, which no analog console would ever do, right? You would just never do this because it would be noisy. Whatever you would hear, it wouldn't be a sine wave anymore. It'd be something tremendously noisy. And if I go over here, it's a sine wave. Yeah. Just to underline the fact that the mix engine for DAWs is substantially different than mixing with analog.
Turn it off.
Thank you. Yeah, but one thing that's really important to understand as well is like I said before, that this the master fader is basically controlling your 24-bit window. So
that's right.
If this was actually a mix that would have dynamic in it, you would still get your 24-bit dynamic resolution. You'd still be fine, right, Andy?
Completely fine. You're still dealing with more dynamic range than you as a human being can tolerate.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's debunked now, that myth that if you turn down the master fader, you only have a few more bits left. No, that's not the truth. The entire range of the master is gigantic, and you're simply moving that window that always stays the same 24-bit resolution to another range in the master.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what's happening.
And by the way, if we're talking about this, you said that the mixer is 64-bit floating point, and the floating point being the thing that's so genius about this is that you're actually moving the range without having to dither the signal in between. It's like a lossless. It's a lossless process.
I'll tell you, it completely is, and because we're not dealing with amplification in any conventional sense, right?
Yeah.
You're not getting that nonlinearity, right? So you're not dealing with an op amp, which is what you would be dealing with on any analog piece of gear. Mm-hmm. Those don't exist, and they wouldn't exist unless we went out of our way to specifically emulate that in a plugin, right? And that's why, again, I think it's important, and I think, Dave, you nailed it, is declaring one thing is true or another thing is true is an incomplete answer. Why this is true in one hand and why this is true on another hand, in these different cases, that's true understanding, and that's kind of what we're here for at Pro Tools Answers. How's that for pillow talk, huh? Branding.
That's great. But so to get back to the question here, he said, what volumes should I keep them at versus the actual track volumes? Can we offer some kind of...
It will determine at what level the level is arriving at a specific point in the mixer, isn't it? So from my perspective, you've got, and in my drum track example, we've got 8 or so tracks that are arriving at the subgroup, and that will arrive at a particular level, say minus 10 dB, and then you'll set the output of that subgroup to then go onto the 2 bus and arrive at that at a certain level as well. So the level that you set it at is going to depend on how much level you want to send to the next destination.
Yeah, but there's also another factor, of course. Not everything has to be equally loud in your mix, right?
No, of course not.
You're fine to pull stuff down.
Yeah,
doesn't have to be.
But that's where the mixing element comes in, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
The signal's got to arrive at the 2 bus in a good balance, and that balance is dependent on what your outputs of each of your stages are.
I tend to record. Well, there's a couple places where I'm not too flexible. I tend to record everything so that I'm peaking at around minus 10 dB. And the only reason why I do that is because that gives me adequate headroom for when somebody says something unusually loud. There's no sonic quality. It's just a buffer area for me to not clip.
And you understand that, so you can make that decision yourself.
Absolutely, yeah, completely. So 10 dB has been fine for me because unless somebody is out of control and has no discipline in terms of their mic technique, which does happen, in which case I'll give myself a bit more. When it comes to subgrouping, on every single subgroup, I do what Dave did. I put a master fader as a pair with my aux track so that master fader controls the level hitting that aux track. Now, if I'm just dealing with native plugins, it doesn't matter. It's whatever, it just, as long as you're not clipping, it doesn't matter. But if I'm dealing with, if I put, for example, some Waves plugins, some UA plugins, I'll make sure that, because I know my plugins, I'll make sure that level is hitting the plugin at the right volume to get the right kind of sound, and I'll use that as a kind of a crafting device. Now, the only other place where I'm not very flexible is I always target from my 2 bus, my final subgroup. My final mix pre-master is at minus 6 dB. Now, it doesn't have to be, but it's such a common practice that you don't want to give anybody any surprises, right? So I just do it. Even some of the automated mastering services like Lander and so on and so forth, they actually recommend minus 6 dB because that's what their algorithms are prepared to do, right?
Interesting.
And so it's so common that it's almost the standard. So
it's almost been standardized from that perspective.
Yeah, but for no reason other than tradition, I think. Your mix is going to sound exactly the same whether it's sitting at minus 0 or minus 6 or minus 1. It's just that's convention.
The way I teach it is that you're going to be sending a pre-master off to a mastering engineer, and you're giving them 6 dB of headroom with which to work. If you were set to send it at minus 10, you'd be giving them 10 dB of headroom. If you were sending it at peaking at -2, you're not giving them any room to work, really. They can't work their magic.
But you could always bring it down. But they can always clip gain. I mean, there's it's a nice. It's a you know what it is. It's polite.
Yes, it's
polite. Yeah. I agree with both of you. My recordings, I also aim for like some averaging around -18, and my peaks probably go up to like -10 or sometimes even slightly higher. It depends on the instrument you're recording, right?
Yeah.
You can or the person singing. Singers have a lot of dynamic range, and one thing that's really good in Pro Tools, if you go set up preferences and under the metering tab, you can actually set your color breaks. This is a handy feature, I think. You set your color break low to -18, so you see exactly where you want to be around. So you can quickly look at the track and see that it's fluttering around the two different greens. And then you set your color break high to whatever you want that you don't want to pass over, like -6 or -10 or something.
That's exactly what mine is set to.
Yeah.
By the way,
I think that's just a great way to do things. But as we said before, this applies to recording in 24-bit, where you have the extra dynamic range over 16-bit, right? If you need to record in 16-bit, these rules do not apply in my book. Then you need to keep your signals slightly hotter, which is of course also an added risk of overcooking stuff down the range, because you might not have the dynamic range that you should have.
And can I grouse a little bit? Can I complain on this podcast just a bit? One of the things, and it's not strictly speaking a gain staging issue, but it is kind of a gainish issue, is a lot of people use compressors to manage levels. And what they'll do is they'll set that freaking thing low, and they've got it's super fast, and it's crunching everything down, and they're doing it to bring the level down to a more manageable level. And what happens is, when the singer is singing quietly, everything's fine, and then all of a sudden it just gets all fat and distorted, not because of digital, not because of analog, but that's what compressors are designed to do when they attenuate. That's where you go back, in my opinion, that's where you go back to clip gain. And you fix those levels in clip gain, you level it off in clip gain, just so at that point you can make sure that the levels are hitting your plugins, not at a specific level, but at a consistent level.
Yeah. That's my secret trick right there, Andy. the clip gain line.
Clip gain line is worth its weight in gold. And by the way, doing that on the volume side will not do what you want it to do. Volume is at the end of signal flow. Clip gain is at the beginning.
Yeah. Something I wanted to come back to, you were talking about 64-bit floating point within the mixer. So, when you and you demonstrated how much gain you can put actually into the system, but it doesn't destroy the sound at the end, does it? If you bring that level down, you can return it back to a decent listenable level, and that's because the computer is able to calculate that, right?
Yeah.
But when it arrives at what the master fader is monitoring right at the end of the session is it sending it back to 24-bit before it hits the outputs of the interface. So it's coming back to a fixed bit system, which is where your clipping will occur.
If your master fader, so we've already determined that master faders, we can have multiple master faders in a session, right?
Yeah.
If your master fader is controlling a bus, that's not an issue. But when your master fader is feeding a physical output, then yes, it is. If you want to think about it as truncating and cutting off all the bits that aren't within that 24-bit window, that's a good way to think of it. And if all of your signal is hitting above the top of the window, then you're going to get that nasty sound, and that's why you move the master fader. You're moving the window. Yeah. Right, and you just make sure that the clip light's not on, and Bob's your uncle. Yeah.
So the clip lights on the main output are actually telling you that the signal is clipping. It's telling you that once the signal exceeds 0 dB, there's no numbers for the computer to turn into sound, is there?
There's no floating going on.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a non-floating master fader. If it's red, that's bad.
It's bad.
If it's yellow, it just looks
okay.
bad.
Yeah.
But there's one.
Be careful. It's not necessarily right, because if that yellow clip light is going on, it could also sound distorted if there's a plug-in in that signal chain that isn't designed to. That has a target voltage.
But you really
it's
don't.
It's never good.
You don't want your yellow light, your yellow overs on anyway.
It just looks so nasty.
But
it's bad technique. I
think
think it's bad technique more than anything.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I think you're right. But also, just to turn things around, you also have some, like if your signal is too low, it's arriving too soft at the master, you could turn the master up and you still have a nice sounding mix.
Now, keep in mind, that doesn't mean, God, this is such a good conversation. I love these calls. It doesn't give you carte blanche to record too low, because if you bring your master fader up, then you're bringing up the noise floor on all that stuff. So it's, in my opinion, record as hot as possible. As hot as you can, leaving yourself enough headroom so that you don't clip, but don't record too soft, because at that point you would bring it back up and you're bringing up a noise floor with it.
Yeah, that's really important. Andy, can we look back on Dave's session? Dave, if you show us your drumming session again.
Yep.
And what I wanted to show here is that even if you record at the right volume, you can still arrive too soft at the master. And that would be if you, for instance, you have your gain staging correct on all of your different tracks, but your drum aux is then pulled down too much, which would result in a mix that's too weak.
Yeah.
And in this case, you could actually theoretically pull up the master fader and still have a nice sounding mix that would be 24-bit resolution and everything, and you'd be fine. But as we have now established, don't do that. You should aim for having your mix floating at the correct. And one thing that we haven't really mentioned is also the way that you actually look at stuff. Metering makes more sense when you're hitting those sweet spots, right?
Here's also something else. I've got nowhere to go with my master fader now at plus 12.
Yeah.
So. Right. But that's controlling the main output anyway. If we were to be bringing, let's say, if we were achieving that much level going into my drum aux and we start bringing that up, I've got nowhere else to go now. I could bring those up, of course, but I've got nowhere else to go. Even if I was all the way up there,
you're painting yourself into a corner.
Yeah.
But then again, why I'm mentioning this is not so that you should always do this, but there might be a situation where you actually your mix is too low and you need to be 2 dBs or 4 or whatever louder. You can turn up the master fader. That's fine.
Yeah. Well, one thing, I think we're going to end up talking about the track types in a different episode, and certainly the master fader.
Yeah.
The way that I like to think of the master fader is a bus trim, because it's controlling the level just before it reaches its destination, isn't it? That's what's happening with my drum trim here. It's controlling all of that level prior to arriving at the subgroup. And with my mix trim, it's controlling the level prior to arriving at, this is essentially my 2 bus. And I'm able to give it a little bit more or a little bit less there.
I think that's a whole other episode where you're doing routing. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, if you want to put a comment down here, I did an Anders. I pointed at the screen. Anyways, if you want to put a comment in there about what signal flow questions you have, I think there's a lot of good content here. So if we can get more Pro Tools questions about signal flow, we're happy to give you more Pro Tools answers.
That's great, Andy.
Right?
So, shall we tie it up in a nice, neat bow then?
Yeah.
Please.
Because I think we've got to. I think we've got to the crux of the question, which was, how do I judge where to put my levels? And it's
and how can 3 people talk about gain staging and be friends afterwards?
Just wait till we get to the sample rate conversation.
Oh, now come on,
that'll break up families.
No, that's a great episode. When are we doing that?
Okay, so we're all tied up.
Yeah, I think this is great. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful discussion.
Great, fantastic. Well, thank you to all of you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you got a lot from that. Please leave some comments with your experiences, maybe even your workflows, your opinions. We'll be interested to read them. All it leaves me to say is thank you very much to Anders.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Andy.
Doitashimashite.
If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Please dislike it if you don't. I don't want people to do. They say that.
Dislike.
Why are you saying that, Dave?
They say that in videos. I don't know. It's a YouTube thing. I don't know. We're just following along. And look forward to our next episode. We release them every Sunday morning. As I said, hit the bell icon if you want to be notified and you forget that Sunday is coming. And there is an episode every Sunday. That bell icon can help you. We also have our new website up and running as well. It's got some interesting content coming onto that. Just advice, reviews, opinions, that kind of thing. Hopefully it can help you in your music production journeys. But all that leaves me to say is my name's Dave. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Pro Tools Answers, and we're out.